John.
We are engaged in what is called fifth generation warfare, or 5Gen or 5G. It's not the 5G cell towers. So that's why I don't use that. Fifth generation warfare. This is an insidious warfare, a psychological warfare, a perception, a warfare of perceptions that precede any kind of kinetic war. There may be a kinetic war, and we're seeing kinetic war in Ukraine, we're seeing a kinetic war in Israel and Gaza. But before all that happened, there was a psychological war and a war of perceptions. This is by design, Will. It is by design to break the social bonds that hold us together as societies and communities and families and nations. This kind of warfare is playing out. Now, I'm going to give some specifics so people know how to recognize it so that we are less vulnerable to it. But I'm using what happened in Israel as an example. The same is happening with climate change. Climate change is a fact. It's not happening for the reasons that we're being given. As a geologist, I can tell you that as a fact, and NASA knows this, and you know, the real scientists, not the pop scientists, but the real scientists know it. So what happens is all of the horrible things, the fires, the floods, the earthquakes, and the suffering is shown in the media. And then there is a guilt that is implied because we put gas in our car, or we use gasoline or natural gas to cook our meal, that we have somehow contributed to that human suffering. And it's not true. It's not supported by the evidence. But these are examples of fifth generation warfare. There is a battle. All of those things in the fifth generation warfare are important, and I want to acknowledge them, and they need to be talked about. We need to talk about them with kindness in our society. The disparity between the rich and the poor, and between the races and between the religions, all that's important. But ultimately, they have become distractions from the deepest battle, which is the battle for our humanness. Our humanness is on the line because through our humanness, we access our divinity and we free ourselves from the fear. When our humanness is limited, we are vulnerable because we are in fear, and susceptible because we are in fear. Those principles are playing out. They're intensifying because we're nearing this 2030. And it's not like exactly January 1st, 2030, but it's in that time frame. Let me just give you an example. You know, a lot of people remember the 2012 phenomenon with the Mayan calendar.
Of course.
And people, I did an interview in 2012 with a guy in New York, and he said, man, what was all this about? He said, nothing happened. You know, when are we going to see some changes on the planet? And then I did an interview with him recently, and he said, when are the changes going to stop? That calendar, that 2012 calendar, is still in play because the cycles of time, they don't end on a dime. There's a buffer of time, allows the cycle, one cycle to come to a close, another one to begin. There's an overlap, there's a buffer. And there's a mathematic function that tells us how long that buffer is. And I wrote about this in the book, Fractal Time. So the buffer for a 5,125 year long cycle is 36 years, 18 years before 2012 and 18 years after. 18 years after 2012 is the year 2030. So we are still living this 2012 phenomenon. Just people don't think about it in that way. So all of the big stuff that keeps people so spun up, because it goes right to the heart of their primal fears and instincts. Very important topics that need to be discussed, but they've been weaponized to divide us, Will, and we all know that. Money, things like gender identification, abortion. I mean, these are all really important social topics. We should, as a society, be able to come together and talk about them in kindness to achieve a goal. They've been weaponized successfully, and they are dividing us now, all the way down to the family dinner table. I know I've got friends and family that this has happened to. So those big things are the diversions. It's really a battle for our humanness. And the transhuman movement is now kicking into high gear because technology is available now that has never been available in the past.